أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So I'm going to wait a few minutes just to let some people jump in. If you're watching this later, you can, I think, forward a few seconds ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, everybody's in the best state of health and iman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow this to be sincerely for His sake and forgive us for any shortcomings and perfect our intentions, inshallah. I will say just ahead of time, anybody who wants to send any questions or comments in the stream, I will try to see them if I can, but there's a lot of questions that I want to try to get to that were sent via Curious Cat, and I'm going to try to address more questions towards the end, inshallah. So if you have questions right now, unless it pertains to exactly what I'm discussing at that moment, I might not be able to get to it. So the topic I want to talk about today was haram relationships. This is a topic that I've contemplated on making some sort of YouTube video or some sort of Twitter video or reminder about this topic for a while, but I just feel like it's such a heavy subject, and I would just always prefer being able to speak about it in person, to speak about it on a one-on-one basis, or even just seeing people's faces in front of me, being able to engage with them. Because it's such a sensitive topic, and too often we treat it with a level of like black and white and harshness that is extremely unproductive. And subhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless one of the brothers who just sent me a message. I won't expose his name, but he sent me a message basically saying a similar thing, that too often we approach this in a very harsh way, where we tell somebody, you're in a haram relationship, you need to cut this off, end this, you're sinning, you're going to go to hell for it, you can never make this right. Obviously that's the wrong approach. We have to understand first and foremost, when we're talking about what or who is to blame for these relationships, is that naturally human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us inclined to be social creatures. He created us inclined towards relationships, both with people on a friendship level and on a romantic level. This is part of who we are. So anybody who, for example, does anything and says, so for example, when you have any guy who does any sort of act of anything in public, for example, and they're like, oh no, but I'm not thinking about how women perceive it, or I'm not worried about that. Bro, you're like biologically inclined to do that. You can't deny that. We need to own up to it and recognize that, and then adjust our behavior accordingly. So in any context, we need to recognize that human beings are inclined towards these relationships, are inclined towards these emotions. We have these emotional needs. Then the question is, how do we act on these needs? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the tools to act on them in the halal way. If you're not able to act on them in the halal way, you need to be able to control yourself. And that's the majority of our existence. I mean, even if you get to that point of marriage, you're not going to lose those desires and that interest and that emotional need entirely. Say for example, you get into a relationship, you get married, and you suddenly... By the way, one thing I'm going to try to do, sorry, I'm going to cut myself off. I'm going to try to slow down when I'm speaking, because in general when I'm on these streams, it feels weird talking to a camera. So sometimes I'll talk a little bit too quickly, and I just want to be able to pause and think and reflect and then continue what I'm saying. So too often we think that once we get into a marriage, all of our desires are going to go away. Everything is going to be right from that point. We're going to lose the interest in pursuing anything else. That's not true. And so you have to live from now trying to restrain these desires, trying to restrain falling into a haram relationship, but also even if it's not a relationship, but even a haram act that has to do with the opposite gender. So we have to constantly be living with this restraint, because that's not going to go away at any point in our life. We need to discipline ourselves now, because if we don't do it now, it's not going to change once we get married. And that's why when we talk about things like pornography, etc., you're not going to lose that addiction if you suddenly get married. It's still going to be there, and this has been studied and discussed for a long time. So, important thing is, we have emotional needs. We have these needs for these relationships. We need to figure out how to act on them in the right way. First and foremost, to do with the topic that was going on Twitter today, which was who's responsible, who's to blame, is it the man, is it the woman? Men and women operate differently, okay? They have different psychologies. There's many things in common, but there's also many things that differ. And if you reject that there's any differences, if you think it's all socialization, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm not going to go into that debate. Whether it's socialization or whether it's natural, there are differences in how we're wired, and we have to acknowledge those differences. So the topic that was going on earlier was saying that men and women are equally to blame for haram relationships. I'm not going to go into the Islamic aspect of this, because that takes a scholar to say yes, the men and the women are equally at fault. That's a scholarly topic. I hope if you have an opinion on that, you could back that up with scholarly evidence. But I'm going to speak just from the social level. Men have a bigger blame than women, and it's because undeniably there is a power dynamic at play whenever there's a man and a woman in a room together, in private together. There's always a power dynamic there. And it's kind of insane to me that the people who, practicing Muslims who will generally say, we support, the traditional roles of the man is the man of the house, he has to take responsibility. Take responsibility now. You're not just responsible later, you need to take responsibility now. So when a man is engaging with a woman and a woman is flirting, whatever, and you decide to go with it, okay, sure, you could say there's equal blame, but you as the man have an added responsibility of being a protector of women, of women, and of being somebody who, when I say protector, I mean that in like the least kind of patronizing way. I mean simply that we need to look out for other women of the ummah like they're our sisters in faith, and like they're our family. That's how we have to look out for them. And we have to recognize men are generally, by all counts, all research, all studies, they're far more likely to engage in predatory behavior, manipulative behavior, in terms of I don't want to say like women can't be manipulative. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is that, yeah, see, white knight, that's a comment, that's from one of my friends though. Men have more ability to be abusive towards women in general. Yes, women can be abusive, but men can do it as well, and men can do it more often. Men have, whether it comes to the physical presence, whether it comes to kind of the emotional dynamic, men are more likely to engage in these behaviors. And so even though men and women both have a fault in this, I think when it comes to haram relationships, men need to own up and take onus and say, look, we need to look out for the women of the ummah. We need to take responsibility, and we need to, we're not going to, if a woman, I mean, subhanAllah, yeah, men can easily say no. Of course they can. But I'm saying they have the added responsibility, not just of that interaction. You have the interaction of men and women who are a man and a woman, for example, who are flirting together, whatever. There's that sin. But then there's the greater role of men as the protectors of women in society, and that's the one that we have to take into account. Women are not the protectors of men. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give that responsibility specifically to men? Why was Rasulullah ﷺ so keen to stress and focus on the fact that men need to be so much better, so good to their women, so respectful to their women, so kind to their women? It sounds like I'm white knighting over here, and somebody accused me earlier of saying this stuff for brownie points. Men have more urges. It's not about the urge. It's about the social role. That's what I'm talking about. It's about the social role that men have to play. That's what we really need to highlight. Men have a social role to look out for other people. And that comes with the power that you've been given. And that power has been given by the fact that, for example, you're physically a more dominant presence in general. Your emotional dynamic is different. Your emotional makeup is different than women. What you look for in a relationship is different. So, for example, when a man is flirting with a woman, he might just be thinking about getting something out of that quick interaction. Whereas a woman, in general, is more inclined to think about the long-term relationship. That's the issue. Long-term relationships and people who are looking for emotional satisfaction. It makes sense. People are just mixing up urges with the roles that they're supposed to do. Exactly. We need to understand that we have a larger social responsibility. And I'm so sick of this self-victimization that so many men are doing in response to feminism. Like, women have, when you look at the history of humanity, women have generally been more abused and put down in almost every single culture, in almost every single society. Now, over the past, say, 50, stretch it to 100 years. Say for the past 100 years, women have risen up, and now, say theoretically that women now have risen above men and are socially greater and in a position of influence over men. Let's imagine that's true. If that is true, you men should not be self-victimizing and instead should be owning up and taking the responsibility. Be like, look, if women are responding like this, we did something wrong to push them into that corner. So what are we going to do right now? That's the responsibility that we have to look at. So that's really just what I wanted to talk about in terms of the who's responsible, who's to blame from the gender perspective. But when it comes to the haram relationships, and now this is kind of more directed to people who might be experiencing it or witnessing it in others, we have to recognize that people that fall into haram relationships, it's not just as simple as zina. It's not just as simple as, oh, I'm attracted to a person, so I want to act on my urges. Very often, there is some sort of emotional need that is being satisfied by these relationships. The people that are engaged in them are not in them always just to satisfy these, these basic urges. There's a huge number of people who are in it because they are lonely, they seek companionship, they seek friendship. They don't have it in their family around them. They don't have it in their friends around them. If people don't have that, they look for it in other places. You know what I mean? And so we could reduce it all into sliding in the DMs and people are just flirting and people are just, trying to, act on their sexual urges. You could reduce it to that, but in my opinion, it's extremely dishonest because so many people are even acting on these urges out of a desire for something more. And that is extremely common with women. And so, by the way, everything that I'm saying right now pertains to Muslim men and women. That's where my experience is. I'm not going to speak about any other subject. But when it comes to, for example, Muslim women, I've seen it so many times where there have been women who will give into what's asked of them from a man because they're hoping that's going to be the person who's finally going to give them that attention, that love, that relationship that they've always wanted. That's something that they sincerely feel and they hope. And so they give into it and they fall for it and they know they're doing something wrong, but they think it's going to pay off in the long term. First of all, obviously that's not correct. But when a person is in a highly emotional state because of that need and that desire, their thinking is not going to be as clear. So it's ridiculous for us to just kind of demonize everybody who's doing this stuff. We need to understand that there are needs that are being satisfied and people, everything that's done is usually done to satisfy some sort of need. And it's not always just that base sexual desire. There's always more than that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So I'm going to look at some of the questions that were sent over here on Curious Cat. So would the sin still be heavier heavier on the man if the girl offers or persuades the man to do something haram? Regardless, what sin is heavier or not, that's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decide. If there's scholarly commentary on that, I'm not aware of it. I don't know. So I can't answer that type of question. So somebody said, explain why going through a girl's parents in the process of courtship is the most ideal both in religious terms and in practical marriage terms. This is a huge question. This we can talk about this for an hour, honestly. We won't, we can. There's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has and the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam have set advice and guidelines for how to pursue a relationship in the right way. When you go through a girl directly, when a man is going through just a girl directly, honestly, I'm just going to say something. A lot of these things are done for the protection of women. A lot of them are done for the protection of women. And it's because so many men could be predatory. Let's just be blunt about that. So when you go through the wali, when you get a man involved in the relationship, when you go to a girl's parents, when you go to a girl's older brother, or whoever her guardian is, whoever her male guardian is, when you do that, it's almost like an acknowledgement that, look, if the man is with the woman alone, there could be more abuse there. And it's because men are just more likely to engage in these. Men could be manipulative of the woman's emotional needs. Men might simply be thinking in that short-term thought process and not the long-term. And we see this, man, when we see, even from practicing Muslims, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them, when they engage in these sort of like secret marriages and they go and get like second and third and fourth wives behind the without the knowledge of their current wife, and all of these types of behaviors. It's like so often men are willing to prioritize that short-term gain over the long-term. And women are more likely to think about that long-term emotional relationship satisfaction than men. This is how they're wired. And you can go and study the research in the psychology about this separately. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not debating that point. So when it comes to the process of courtship, as a man, when a man goes through a woman's father or goes through her wali, the woman is going to have somebody who knows what a man could do wrong. You know what I mean? And women, as much as you think you understand men, you don't understand men. You don't understand men. You really don't. Chill. By the way, bro, I know you've been sending a bunch of questions and stuff, but I haven't been able to read them because they disappear in like 4 seconds. That's why I said nobody send any questions over here. But yeah, when there's that role of the wali, that's literally a protector in the relationship. He's a protector of that woman until he could say, look, we trust the man that you're going to. We trust that this person is going to respect the guidelines of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That respect has to be earned, and it's not earned in the DMs. It's not earned in the individual, on a one-on-one basis. You know what I mean? Like if I send a message to a girl, and I'm talking to her, and she says, oh, you know, she knows, oh, Tariq is this guy who posts about, you know, Islamic stuff, whatever. He's not going to do anything wrong. And I'm like, yeah, so let's just keep this between us. Let's talk. Dude, that's why you get the wali involved. That's why you get the wali involved. You know what I mean? And if a man is trying to contact a woman and he's not getting another man involved, he's going to abuse, even if he isn't going to do it, but he's more likely to abuse that power dynamic that exists there. You know what I mean? So that process of courtship is a process of protection. It's also a process of it's not always necessarily going to be the process where you're going to find out everything about a person 100%, because you're never going to be able to find that out. And if you think that you're going to find out about a person 100% if you talk for a few months and you DM and you date and you do whatever, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And, you know, we have evidence of that, right? We see in Western societies, you know, dating culture. That hasn't contributed to people knowing each other better and having more successful marriages at all. It's been the opposite. Relationships have been a lot more unsuccessful. So, you know, the dating process doesn't work. The process of courtship has a lot of benefits. So if you want to go into a debate on which one is better, we're going to go into the process of the sunnah. If you disagree with the sunnah, then you have lost some trust within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's really the bottom line, to be honest. If you think that you know better than Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you're saying that if you'd rather trust your own ability rather than Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what are you saying at that point? Like, I can't have a discussion if you're saying I know better than them, because the whole basis of our discussion right now is that we're here understanding the relationship as it pertains to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the next questions was, don't you think both parties warrant blame? Yes, of course, both parties in a relationship, the man and the woman, both have fault. But men have to take on that responsibility of being the protectors of women. They have to own up to that. You can't, if you have the macho mentality of man up and toughen up and the men are the men of the house and, you know, they wear the pants and they need to do whatever, okay, then that exists both in a relationship and outside of a relationship, that the man has to own up and take responsibility. That's what you have to do. Simple. I understand that men are the ones who jump and go for women. Do men prey on women's insecurities and give them false hope of love and comfort? Yes, absolutely. And I will say this, it's not always because the men have bad intentions. I swear. There are men who will say all the right things to a woman and say, you know, promise her the world. And they mean it sincerely. But they might just be thinking with their hormones at that moment. That's it. Not only would they be thinking with their hormones, but sometimes they're just immature and they don't understand the world. You know, there might be a 19-year-old guy, a 20-year-old guy who's like, or even younger, 14, 15, 16, who's like, yeah, I'm going to love you to the rest of time. And, you know, you're my everything and you're my this and you're my that. Once they grow up a little bit, they see a little bit more of the world. They're like, I don't know, man. I'm not sure about that promise I made. And that's one of the reasons why courtship is important, why the Islamic process with the wali involved is so important. Because the men are going to be able to decipher that better. The older men, the guardians, you know, they're going to be able to decipher that better and be like, this guy isn't even ready. He's promising you the world, but he's not capable of it yet. How would you define a haram relationship? Yeah, so I probably should have done that in the beginning. What I'd simply say is a haram relationship, without going into too many technicalities, is a relationship between a man and a woman, or technically speaking, a relationship between any two people which crosses the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know what I mean? Specifically when I'm talking about haram relationships, I'm talking about romantic relationships. Right now in this context, between men and women, when there's a romantic involvement, when they usually there's some sort of romantic involvement, love involved, maybe some sort of shape of zina. But yeah, so it's a relationship in which the people are engaging in the relationship. You know what I mean? So a haram relationship is not, for example, for a woman and a man to have, maybe. Actually, I don't want to go into that. I really don't want to like highlight this. I think most people understand the point that I'm making at this point. Please state your position as to whether men and females can simply be friends. My belief is that they cannot. Eventually, something will develop, hence why we must guard our modesty and question our intentions when interacting with the opposite gender. Okay, the issue with that is that the implication there is, okay, so if you're saying that men and women can't be friends because something could develop, that means if we can guarantee that nothing will develop, that men and women could be friends. That's the implication over here. And I disagree with that, because there can be contexts in which men and women might not be, a man and a woman might not have, there might be zero potential for there to be anything haram going on afterwards, and they still shouldn't be they shouldn't be friends. And when I say friends, I just mean it in the sense of like, you could be friendly. You could have, these family friends where there's a family dynamic involved. There's that. But any situation where there's a man and a woman in private, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already said the shaytaan is the third. So even if that friendship has good intentions, there's going to be the influence of the shaytaan. That might not mean that you two will get into a relationship later. It might not mean that you two are going to engage in something haram. But with the shaytaan present, that's something that is disliked. That's something that's going to go wrong in some way, shape, or form. In general, I do think, though, that when there's a man and a woman who are friends, there's an extremely high likelihood that somebody on either side is going to develop some sort of feelings later. And even if they don't develop emotional feelings later, that friendship could affect their marriage in the future. That's another issue, right? Because the more, as a man, for example, the more women that you're friends with, the more that you're looking for the positive traits in every single girl that you know in the woman that you're going to marry. You know what I mean? And so if you only know women on a more superficial level or on a more public level, then it's not going to be the same level of influence. But for example, if I have say, for example, this like really close female friend that's like, I consider her my best friend, I'm going to be looking for so many of those positive characteristics in her, in my future spouse. And then say, for example, I have other female friends as well. I want now in my spouse, I want somebody who's as funny as this girl that I know, as pretty as this girl that I know, as eloquent as this girl, dresses as well as this girl. And so suddenly it makes it a lot more difficult for you to be even satisfied in your own relationship. So there's that element. Why is it difficult for people to accept that the new typical age for a female to get married is not 24 years old anymore? There's a bad cultural stigma that women expire after that age. We're not going to fix any cultural stigmas right here. All I'm going to say is that, there's a lot to consider in any relationship, in any marriage. There's a lot to consider. And for some people, certain ages are incompatible with them. I think we need to just learn to prioritize things better. We should be prioritizing, obviously, deen. We should be absolutely prioritizing family. We should be prioritizing those two things, I think, above everything else. And then everything else has a small factor, and everybody has the right to their preferences. Is it haram to get to know each other by texting? Is it considered to being in a relationship? I don't know what the texting involves. I don't know. So I'm not going to answer that. If one is in a haram relationship, stop and repent it out of shame and cut 100% communication with the other person until both of them were ready to get married years later. Can there still be barakah in the new halal relationship? Of course. Nobody can say that there's zero barakah in this or there's never going to be barakah. Absolutely not. If you're saying, we did something haram, we repented, we did our best to do things the right way, will there be barakah? Inshallah ta'ala, yes, of course. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees the efforts that you're putting forth. You're not doomed because you made a mistake in the past. You're doomed if you persist on the mistake and you refuse to correct it. That's what dooms you. Does it look bad upon a woman to express interest in a brother? Will she look desperate? What's a permissible way to tell him she wants to get to know him for the purpose of seeking a spouse and that she wants family involved and is interested in discussing this further? Look, maybe you should discuss this with somebody else, but in my humble opinion, in general, from everything that I know about men, it's not a good look for a woman to be expressing interest in a brother. If she wants to express interest, the best thing that I would say is somehow have one of her siblings, or like have her brother or her father, her wali, or some sort of maybe a male family friend who knows the two parties, or maybe even just maybe even a female family friend, or some sort of mutual connection that they have between them, to maybe hint at pursuing, to the guy to go after the woman. That is a much better approach than saying, you know, having a woman just going directly at the man. That does, in general, it does look desperate. I'm sorry. I've seen it. I've seen people do it in front of me. Like I've seen people do it, and it backfires, man. It's not a good look. How does one politely turn down a request for marriage from a Muslim of a different sect? I mean, as politely as you would turn down any other request. If that's your position. You know, I'm not gonna go into that too much. Okay, do messages, okay, the term is sexting. Does sexting equal to actual zina? There's different types of zina. That type of texting is absolutely a form of zina. We know with zina, there's zina of the eyes, there's zina of the mouth, there's zina of the hands, there's zina of the ears, So there's zina. It comes in so many different shapes and forms, and I almost want to say, like, you know it when you see it. Like, it's, you know it. People at this age, I'm assuming most of you are over the age of 16, 18, 20. You know what it is, you know? So yeah, there's different forms of it. And so you can't just say, well, just because we're not engaging in something physical that we're fine. No, you know, you're still engaging in haram. And, you know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that, and allow us to recognize that and not make excuses for it. This is not related to the topic. If someone was to ask, what is a haram relationship and why are they haram? How would you respond? Yeah, so somebody asked that already. But what I would simply say is, what is a haram relationship? You also kind of know it. It's a relationship between two people that is not following the guidelines of Islam, and either for the sake of a short-term gratification or a long-term gratification. You know what I mean? That's what a haram relationship is. You know it when you see it. When you have, you know, a guy and a girl who are interested in getting to know each other and interested in marrying, and they're spending, you know, months going back and forth and talking and flirting and doing whatever. That's a haram relationship. You know what I mean? When you look at a woman and the woman looks back at you, and there's like this mutual understanding that, like, you guys are, you know, together, even though you don't really outwardly say it and you've never acknowledged it, but like you guys always talk and you have this private relationship and you guys are, you know, the best of friends. Yeah, that's a haram relationship. Like, you guys know, you know, right? I don't know if I really have to highlight that. You know what I mean? How would you respond? And what's wrong with dating? Dating removes the barrier that the sunnah places. The sunnah places the barrier of having the wedding. It sets the barrier of that family environment. It sets the barrier of saying, look, we recognize that men and women, there's an energy there, as Ustad Abedullah once put it. There's an energy, Ustad Abedullah Evans, by the way. Check out any of his work. Men and women, there's an energy between them, okay? With that energy, things can go wrong. The shaytaan is at play. The shaytaan can influence that. And so, Islamically speaking, if you say we're above it, you're wrong. And Islam sets the guidelines so that knowing that, look, if a man and woman are interested, here are the guidelines to get to know each other the right way, to protect both of your hearts, to protect both of you guys from falling into haram, but also from falling into more pain than is necessary. You know what I mean? Like, every relationship, even if it's approached the right way, if it falls apart, it can hurt. But Islamically speaking, there's a level of protection for the hearts there, because it's not just this one-on-one interaction where, you know, people can say everything that they want to each other and there's no filter. There's a level of filtering which makes your decision going into the marriage a little bit more rational, a little bit more balanced, and less influenced and less directed by emotion. That's really important. How do you go about convincing a friend to get out of a haram relationship? Send them this stream. Just kidding. Don't. There's a lot better content online. Literally, just open up on YouTube and just open up, you know, haram relationships, and there's great videos by people like Sheikh Omar Suleiman, and yeah. what happens if you if you end up in a halal relationship and you're sexually incompatible with your spouse? What's the point of waiting if your marriage is going to fail because of that? Where's the barakah? I don't know about that. I can't talk about that. Get counseling. That's what I would say, honestly. Get counseling. If you're incompatible, get counseling. There's a lot of counseling that you could do with Muslims and non-Muslims. Yeah, go to a professional and find out how do we make this better. What's the point of waiting till marriage if it's gonna fail because of that? I mean, that's kind of a cynical way to look at marriage. Marriage is not just about satisfying those urges. And like I said, it's like those urges, even when you get married, for example, in general, as a man, most of the time, your wife is not going to look the same way in 10, 15 years. There's not going to be that same level of attraction. Does that mean that, okay, what was the point of waiting for marriage? Where's the barakah now? No, that's not what it's about. There's so much more to do in a marriage than that. And the barakah is not just about having sexual satisfaction. That's not how it works. The barakah comes from so much more. It comes from doing things the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. It comes from protecting your own heart, protecting it from the influence of the shaytaan, and from other things. Desires don't go away once you're married. So weird to say. I'd be interested to see where you got this concept. Dude, biologically speaking, your desires don't go away after you're married. What? Where I got this concept from human biology. Sorry, I don't mean to be like mocking, but like you put like a million question marks and in the beginning. Like, is it really that crazy? It's not a constant struggle to fight off thoughts about others. I mean, if you're somebody who doesn't lower your gaze, yes, it is. Actually, it is. If you don't lower your gaze, you will constantly be attracted to more and more things. As a man, you have that urge. That drive is going to be extremely ever present in you. And it only tones down when you lower your gaze and when you're mindful of the limits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for you. If you're having no attraction after marriage, there's something wrong with you biologically. You can be happily married with absolutely no desires for other romantic relationships. Again, you might be happily married and not want another, say, long-term relationship, but you still might want a short-term sexual relationship with another person. You might have that desire. That's how human beings are wired. In fact, I'd argue it's really easy and really common. Yeah, I mean, if you're lowering your gaze and you're doing everything the right way, then yeah, those desires will swell down. But as long as your eyes are open and looking at other people, you're gonna fall into more more attraction, And so that was the majority of the curious cat questions. Some of them were not to do with this topic, and I really don't want to. I really just want to stay on topic for this one. Does anybody else have any questions? I know people were sending questions over here in the Periscope stream, but I haven't been able to see it. Talk about the sexualization of love. I mean, yeah, that's. I think that kind of goes. I don't know how much needs to be explained about that. In general, we equate nowadays, love with sexual satisfaction, and that's just because of. So you can say it's because of media and pop culture, but there's a lot of factors. And I have to do a lot more, reading and preparation in order to give that topic an adequate discussion. But yeah, society as a whole is hypersexualized. Everything's become hypersexualized. So there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, any other questions? Some people sent things on Twitter that I didn't respond to. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just wrap this up by saying, when it comes to haram relationships, true love is about companionship. Sure. Probably not 100% related to the topic, but in your opinion, how important is religious compatibility? Definitely important, and it's absolutely something critical that you should look at. You should always be trying to find somebody who's going to make you better, and I think that's something that goes both ways. Some people are better at some things, and some people are better at others. So, if you say you want to find somebody who's better than you Islamically, what that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna look for a scholar, but it's gonna be somebody who's gonna better you and make you a better person in Deen, and you should be able to do the same thing to them. It doesn't make one or the other better, but you should be looking at that. When it comes to relationships, getting out of haram relationships, Man, the best thing that I could tell you is don't wean it off. Don't think you could delay it. Don't think like you could be like, oh, we're just gonna take things slow, or I'm gonna ghost out of it, or we're only gonna talk once in a while, and we're just gonna check up here and there. Dude, cut it off. Cut it off. You guys, you have a last final conversation where you say, look, here's what's going on. I want to make things halal. I want to do things the right way. I want barakah. I want the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If things are meant to work out, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to pursue it in the halal way in the future. And if it's not, then it is what it is. I'm really sorry. Thank you for your friendship. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. You have to cut it off like that. And you have to cut it off in a moment where you feel empowered, in a moment where you feel your iman is high. You have to cut it off in a moment where you're like, look, I know this isn't what I emotionally want to do, and I know that this is going to hurt me, but I know this is the right decision. And you have to be able to go against what your desires are in those moments. And again, those desires don't have to be sexual. It could be these emotional needs that you have. You might be, you might, to be clear, there is a lot of, I'm going to say this with caution. Somebody is going to like cut this and take it out of context. There is good that can come from haram relationships. I'm going to say that. Before you lynch me, if there wasn't any sort of positive element or benefit that a person felt from a haram relationship, they wouldn't be in it. You know? It makes you feel good. It gives you validation. It gives you confidence. It gives you, a feeling of happiness. You experience that. You know what I mean? It's like these haram relationships aren't just like, oh, it's like we're in this vile, disgusting thing and we need to get out. No, it's like people feel good about it. And so you have to recognize is that you can't wait for the relationship to make you feel bad in order for you to get out. Because what you need to look at is that even though there are short-term benefits to the relationship, there's a lot more at risk in the long term with your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with, who you hope to become in the future. You're sacrificing the future for the short-term gain, and that's something that you have to be able to prioritize at some point and say, look, I want the long-term win. I want the win because I don't want to keep filling my heart with something that displeases Allah. I don't want to keep filling my heart with something that takes me away from Allah. And as much as you might think, oh no, but they make me a better person, dude, if you're engaging in something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, it's not good for you. It's simply not going to be good for you. If you're engaging in something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, you're filling your heart with something that He dislikes, that's a part of your heart that you can't give to Allah. You're choosing this person and what they give you over Allah. And what I'm saying is, you have to remember the hadith where Rasulullah ﷺ gives the promise, and I'm paraphrasing of course, but whoever replaces something, whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will replace it with something better. Many things we perceive as good for us truly end up bad for us. Absolutely, absolutely. We perceive something to be good, and it's because there might actually be some short-term benefits that we get. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even says about alcohol. Allah says about alcohol in the Quran that there is benefits from alcohol, but the harms outweigh the benefits. So we're not here saying, oh, get away from it because it's gonna destroy your life, whatever. But it will have harms in the long term that are greater than any benefit that you might get. Some people were like, some people were kind of sarcastically looking at the topic of haram relationships. Oh, this is an important part. Man, I really should have started the beginning of the stream with this. This is actually one of the reasons why I saw this and I was like, oh, I want to do a stream about this because this is a long thing to discuss. So, some people are looking at haram relationships. Also, haram relationships, friendships often put a person in a constant state of anxiety. Absolutely, absolutely. But see, then the question is going to be, well, what if I don't have anxiety? What if it makes me feel better? What if it only makes me feel good? What if it doesn't give me that stress? Well, it doesn't change the validity. You know what I mean? But I do agree that especially people who have some sort of Islamic education, some sort of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they know what they're engaging in is the haram, yeah, it gives them that anxiety and it gives them added stress and it doesn't make their life any easier. So the point that I wanted to make, I think I lost it for a second. No, now I remembered. So, exactly, that's actually what I was about to talk about. I dislike this idea of saying leave haram relationships because it might fail. I wanted to talk about that. Because I've said a similar statement in the past, and I stand by it. Leave haram relationships because there's not going to be barakah in it. We actually do have, when we say barakah, or we say the relationship is going to fail, let's highlight something. I truly believe a relationship that is haram that is not repented for, that people insist on doing. Oh yeah, by the way, one of the reasons why I'm kind of not looking at the screen is because there's questions popping up and it's distracting me when I'm seeing it. So because I can't answer them when I'm speaking and they're disappearing really quickly. So as it pertains to haram relationships failing, some people say, oh, I saw this relationship and these people have been married for 70 years and it's a haram relationship and they're not even Muslim and they're completely fine and it was a love relationship. And they think it's like this proves their point. It doesn't, because first of all, you never know actually what people are going with privately. You actually never know how happy somebody is. Just because it lasted for a long time, it doesn't mean they're happy. Now, what if they are happy? And then we have to highlight what is the happiness that they feel. Short-term, material, worldly happiness. Can they feel that? Yes, of course. In their afterlife, though, there will be... Okay, I'm not going to say that in their afterlife there won't be happiness. That's not what I'm saying. Let me rephrase it. In the short term, here, I'm going to actually quote, oh, he deleted it. Oh no. I wanted to read what the guy had said. But essentially he's saying, like, I've seen love relationships and they go completely fine. It happens. And my point is, first of all, it's not about having, a love marriage or a love relationship. That's not what it's about. It's about the process of going through it the halal way. And in order for you to be happy, in order for a relationship to be successful and to have barakah in it, it's not just about how the two people feel. When there's barakah in a relationship, the entire family feels it. The children feel it. It's passed on in the way that they raise their kids. It's passed on in the way that people interact with their family outside of the home. That barakah is felt in the afterlife, in this life. It's felt comprehensively. So because two people did things the wrong way and they're happy, it doesn't mean that they got the full blessing of what the halal and correct marriage would have been. You know what I mean? Western civilization is not compatible with Islamic believers. Yikes. How do I remove you from this conversation? That's a very simplistic and incorrect statement to make. Sorry, man. Or woman. I don't know who you are. But yeah, the point that I was trying to make, you can't simply demonize the relationship and be like, or no, you can't idealize the relationship and say, oh, I've seen people get married the haram way and they're completely happy. You don't know how the barakah of that relationship and how the blessings of that relationship are going to appear in the long term. Like when you see things done the halal way, in general, there's a higher likelihood of things going right Islamically and for the family and for the community. Also in a haram relationship, your heart and soul rot. Your ability to make good judgment wears away. Yup, 100%. 100%. I mean, there's always... I've talked about this. I've talked about this before. But I don't know if I've talked about it in any of the streams or on Twitter. But it's something that I've brought up in a few halaqas before. But basically, the way that I view it is that you have one heart, okay? You have one heart. This is a heart. A heart has, say, 100% of it. Our heart has 100%. There's 100 parts to it, theoretically. You can't give more than 100% of you to anything. And our goal as Muslims is to give 100% of our heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our goal in our life. To purify our intentions and everything that we do to make it for Allah. So when you're working, when you're at school, when you're studying, when you're hanging out with your friends, the goal is to make this all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you hang out with good people because you don't want to engage in haram because you want your friendship to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perfect. You don't post things online haram because you want your tweets and everything to be inshallah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't watch, haram movies or haram TV or whatever because you want even your entertainment to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want everything to be for Allah. When you engage in a haram relationship, that part of your life that you've now given to a significant other cannot be for Allah. Because you're doing something that Allah dislikes, that you know He dislikes, and you're insisting on doing it. It can't be for Allah. So say, and by the way, man, these relationships dominate a huge part of your thought process and of your heart. They dominate your life. And so the question is, if you're giving, say, 20% of that heart to this relationship, 30%, 40%. So many people get into relationships where their significant other becomes their whole world. They become their other half, right? That 50% of their heart, whatever you want to say. When you've given all that much to somebody other than Allah, how much is left for Him? How much is left? It's not a relationship. I'm just going to ignore your comments, I'm sorry. No, many people get into relationships for more than a quick boom boom. They get into the relationship for a lot of other needs. People in haram relationships are often with someone that they normally wouldn't want to be with because they can't make good decisions. Oh, that is actually common. I don't know if that's everybody. I don't know how common it is. I don't know if it's a majority, but you're right. I mean, subhanallah. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to elaborate on that point too much, but yeah, your ability to make judgment your ability to make good judgment is absolutely impaired, because you have to recognize, man, when you walk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a nur and a guidance that it gives to every decision that you make, for every choice that you make. And I mean, the closer that you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the better your judgment will be, inshallah. And that's why when some people, you could, a person's actions and decisions and behaviors are a reflection of their iman. Iman has an outward, it has an outward representation. It does, and so it's not to say that if somebody looks religious, that they are religious, but it is to say that the more that we purify ourselves internally, the more that should reflect outwardly in our decisions and in the way that we live our life. So when you're removing your ability to have that great iman because you're leaving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what ends up happening is that, yeah, you're going to make those bad decisions. Early marriage is often encouraged, but don't you think that often people get married before Don't even get me started about early marriages, man. Don't even get me started about early marriages and the hype that people give to early marriages. Man, you get married when you're ready. My advice is to men, okay? This isn't for women. Dude, stop rushing for marriage at 20, 22, 23, 24. You get married when you're ready. You don't put a number on it. When you're financially capable of getting married, you should be getting married. If you're out and you've left home, for example, and you're living alone and you're working and doing whatever, you should be married. You have to protect yourself from that fitna. When you get to that point where you are financially stable, you get married. You have to be searching for marriage. That's what you have to be doing. But if you're not even financially stable, stop thinking about it. Really, just stop. Just push it out of your mind. Don't overthink it. It'll come at the right time. You need to put yourself in a position. And then people will say, that the marriage will bring with it rizq. Even if you don't have it, trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and go for it. Look, man, if you want to have that iman and go into it blindly, sure. Most people, they can't just do that because they haven't even invested enough with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hope that suddenly they're just going to get married and their whole life is going to figure itself out. You tie your camel and you trust Allah. Don't just trust Allah. Tie your camel. Get a job. Look, if you're extremely well off, your families are covering all of your expenses, then sure, get married at a young age. If you're not well off, or if you're just a normal person where, falling into that relationship might even put your family in an extreme financial burden, stop thinking about it. And if you can't stop thinking about it, push yourself away from the environments that are making you think about it. SubhanAllah, sometimes these thoughts often come even from environments where there's, practicing Muslims. So from MSAs and from youth groups, whatever, where, there's a bunch of guys or a bunch of girls who are all, they all have those hormones going and they're all thinking, oh, maybe I'm the next one, or maybe I'm going to marry this person, get married to that person. If you're involved in these activities, if you're going to places for that pursuit when you're not even ready financially to get married, stop, leave it, go away, stay away, isolate yourself, go away from the opposite gender as far as possible. Because if your thought process is about marriage, you're screwing yourself. And it's the same thing with social media. So many people who, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but a lot of people will tweet things related to Islam, for example, as an excuse and a justification to slide in and form friendships and relationships with random women on the internet. And maybe that's going to be the one, maybe I'm going to marry that person. Dude, honestly, if that's how your mentality is, stop tweeting about Islam. Stop tweeting. Just get off Twitter. Just get off. Stay away. Stay away from interacting with the opposite gender. How do I advise my friends coming out of haram relationships? Sorry, the message disappeared. If you could send it again, that would be appreciated. Yeah, so one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of Periscope or streaming, whatever. I feel like it's very scattered. I've done some talks about this subject, but I don't think I have any of them online. I don't think so. What I will say is though that in at least one of the videos that I have on my YouTube page, there's a halaqah about friendship, and I touch on the aspect of it, I think, of relationships in it. But that's from like 2 years ago, so I'm gonna like I condemn anything that I said in it. I don't know how good of how good any of the advice is. I don't remember it. I'm just kidding. I don't actually condemn it, but yeah. Yeah, I just think, yeah, I hate when people use Islam as an excuse to slide into the DMs, ya Allah. Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. I posted something about that a few months ago. I posted a thread about that too, and yep. PG going to have 15 points per game. I hope Paul George doesn't come to the Lakers. Kyle Kuzma and Brandon Ingram can man the 3 and 4 well enough. They don't need Paul George. And the 2, Josh Hart is the future. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap up over here. If anybody has any questions or any comments, please send them right now. Maybe in the future I'll make some sort of video, or I'll make some sort of video or reminder or something, or maybe I'll record a halaqah or something that I give on this topic. But for now, I just wanted to kind of discuss this topic. In summary, men need to take ownership and stop blaming women. Stop self-victimizing yourself. You know, take ownership, man. In general, between a man and a woman, a man has a position of power. In general, you have some sort of power in that dynamic. And so you have to recognize that, man. Whether it's because some women might be a little bit more emotionally needy, or might be more inclined to look for the long-term relationship. You know, just there's a lot of factors in this. Anybody who thinks I'm going for brownie points or like I'm white knighting, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, if you want to accuse intentions, I can't do anything to defend that. Anyway, inshallah khair. If anybody has any comments, shoot them real quick. Oh, I should check the Curious Cat page again. Also, in general, if you send me Curious Cat questions and comments, I don't respond to like personal things, and in general, I don't really respond to questions that are sent there. I'll use them for stuff like this. How do I advise my friends to come out of haram relationships? What's the better way? I mean, everything that we talked about today. If you want, like, re-listen to this and maybe get some of the points. But you can also just look up videos on YouTube and stuff. There's a lot of good content over there. How to advise them. You should appeal to them, man. You should appeal to their good intentions. Appeal to the fact. Don't demonize their actions. Show them that you're there. A lot of times people are in these relationships out of emotional need. Be there for them. Offer them a replacement. You know what I mean? So if somebody's coming out of a relationship, you better be a good friend if you're the one that's pulling them out of it. You know what I mean? Offer them a replacement. Get them involved in some sort of community efforts, community initiatives. Get them to know other people around you. Get them more involved with a positive social group. There's a lot that you could do to help somebody and push them away from that. And honestly, I would even say, start pulling them towards the deen and towards positive elements and positive things like good friends, etc. before you force them out of that relationship. The more that you surround them in a good environment, as long as they know that what they're doing is haram, that guilt, inshallah, hopefully it'll eat at them to the point that they end up leaving. So, inshallah khair. I think that if someone's even entertaining a haram relationship, they should ask themselves why and seek counseling. I think we toss seek counseling a little bit loosely. Like, seek counseling, go see a psychiatrist, go see a therapist. I mean, you don't need counseling to know that there's a lot of very normal needs and desires that pull us into haram relationships. There's a lot of very natural, normal needs and desires. So it's not that big of a deal. It's not like, oh, I'm thinking about going into a haram relationship. What's wrong with me? You're human. Congratulations. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clear our hearts, protect us from falling into haram, and allow us to see the truth as truth and the falsehood as falsehood, and forgive us for our shortcomings. Jazakumullah khair for everybody for tuning in, and keeping your dua, please. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.